You know that moment when the day is finally over, the lights are off, and your body feels heavy in the bed, but your mind suddenly decides it's time to wake up? Right, in a productive way, not with clear plans or useful ideas, just thoughts, loose ones, old ones, questions that don't seem to have answers. You replay conversations you thought you were done with. You imagine futures that haven't happened yet. You revisit moments that felt small at the time but now feel strangely important. And you wonder why this only happens at night. For a long time, many people assume this means something is wrong with them, that they're anxious or mentally undisciplined or incapable of resting properly. Some even start to dread bedtime, not because they dislike sleep, but because they know what comes before it, the quiet, the thinking, the endless mental replay. But psychology suggests something far more interesting is happening here, something that has less to do with weakness and more to do with how the human mind actually works. Here's where it gets fascinating. During the day, your brain is under constant demand. You're making decisions, responding to people, navigating expectations, and staying alert to your surroundings. Psychologists refer to this as high external engagement. Your attention is directed outward almost all the time. In that state, your brain prioritizes efficiency. It focuses on what needs to be done next, not on how everything feels. That means many thoughts and emotions don't get fully processed, not because you're avoiding them intentionally, but because there simply isn't space. Your brain is busy keeping you functional. So feelings get postponed, questions get shelved, reflections get delayed. They don't disappear, they wait. At night, all of that external pressure fades. There are no emails to answer, no conversations to manage, no tasks demanding immediate attention. Your brain finally exits performance mode. And when it does, it naturally turns inward. Research on emotional processing shows that the brain tends to revisit unresolved experiences during periods of low stimulation. That's why thoughts feel louder at night. It's not because they suddenly appeared, it's because nothing else is competing with them anymore. This is the part most people miss. Overthinking at night isn't your mind spiraling out of control. It's your mind doing delayed work. It's catching up on everything it didn't have time to feel during the day. Studies on emotional suppression show that when emotions are held back, they don't fade. They resurface later, often during moments of stillness. And for most people, nighttime is the longest uninterrupted stretch of stillness they experience. That's also why the thoughts don't feel random. They're usually personal, emotional, meaningful. You're not thinking about abstract facts or neutral topics. You're thinking about relationships, choices, identity, and uncertainty. That's because the brain's default mode network, which becomes more active at rest, is responsible for self-reflection, memory, and meaning-making. In simple terms, when you stop doing, your brain starts asking, "What does all of this mean?" This is where the experience becomes confusing. You tell yourself you should be relaxing. You might even feel frustrated that you can't just sleep. But the brain doesn't respond to instructions like that. Its job isn't to help you rest. Its job is to help you understand, predict, and protect. And when the world goes quiet, it starts scanning your life for anything unresolved. That scanning often shows up as replaying conversations, not because you want to torture yourself, but because your brain is checking social safety. Humans are wired to care deeply about connection. Subtle moments of tension, misunderstanding, or regret carry emotional weight because they affect belonging. At night, your brain revisits those moments, asking, "Did that threaten my relationships? Did I miss something important?" For people who overthink at night, this process is often intensified because they tend to be more reflective by nature. Research on personality traits suggests that individuals high in introspection and emotional sensitivity are more likely to process experiences internally rather than externally. They don't always talk things out immediately. They think things through. They observe. they replay, they analyze meaning. During the day, that tendency is kept in check by distractions and responsibilities. At night, it comes forward fully. And because it's been waiting all day, it can feel overwhelming. Thoughts arrive all at once without structure or resolution. That's why it feels like your mind is racing, even though it's technically doing something very natural. There's also an important emotional layer here that rarely gets acknowledged. Many night overthinkers are people who are very good at holding it together. They show up, they perform, they manage stress without letting it spill over too much. They don't always give themselves permission to feel things deeply in real time, not because they're emotionally disconnected, but because they've learned to prioritize stability. So night becomes the only space where those held emotions can exist freely. There's no audience, no pressure to respond correctly, no need to be composed, just you and your thoughts. In that space, feelings finally have room to surface, and because they've been contained for so long, they often come up with intensity. This is why overthinking at night can feel emotional even when the thoughts themselves seem logical. You might be analyzing a situation, but underneath that analysis is usually a feeling: uncertainty, sadness, longing, regret, fear. The thinking is often just the mind's way of approaching an emotion it hasn't fully touched yet. Psychological research on rumination often frames it as something negative, but that's only part of the picture. Not all repetitive thinking is destructive. There's a difference between self-criticism and self-examination. Many people who overthink at night aren't attacking themselves. They're trying to understand themselves. They're searching for coherence. They want their experiences to fit together in a way that makes sense. That desire for meaning is especially strong in people who value depth, people who don't skim through life emotionally, people who feel things fully, even if they don't always express them outwardly. For them, nighttime thinking isn't a failure to relax, it's a sign of an active inner world. Of course, that doesn't mean it's always comfortable. Extended periods of unresolved thinking can feel exhausting. Research shows that when thoughts loop without resolution, the nervous system can remain slightly activated, making it harder to fall asleep. But even that has a logic to it. Your brain doesn't want to rest while something feels unfinished. Rest, to the brain, is safest when things feel understood. That's why the thoughts often circle the same themes: relationships, identity, direction. These are not small topics. They're core questions, and when they don't have clear answers, your brain keeps returning to them, hoping repetition will produce clarity. What's important to understand is that this pattern doesn't mean you're mentally disintegrated or emotionally unstable. It means your mind values integration. It wants your experiences to align with who you believe you are and where you think you're going. When there's a gap there, the mind notices. There's also a cultural misunderstanding that plays a role here. We tend to associate calmness with mental health and restlessness with dysfunction. But psychological research shows that mental activity varies widely between individuals. Some people genuinely quiet down easily. Others have minds that stay active when external input disappears. Neither is inherently healthier. They're just different cognitive styles. People who overthink at night often fall into the latter category. Their minds don't shut off automatically. They transition, slowly, thoughtfully, and when given silence, they fill it with reflection. This is why attempts to force quiet can feel frustrating. You're essentially asking a meaning-oriented mind to stop doing what it does best. Understanding doesn't come from suppression, it comes from awareness. And awareness is exactly what night brings. So if you find yourself lying awake, revisiting moments, imagining conversations, or questioning paths, it might help to see that experience differently, not as a failure to relax, but as a moment when your inner world finally has space, a moment when your mind is allowed to speak without interruption. The psychology of overthinking at night isn't really about sleep. It's about timing. It's about when your brain feels safe enough to turn inward. It's about how unresolved experiences wait patiently until the noise of the day fades. And it's about how some minds are wired to search for meaning the moment they're given silence. That doesn't mean the thoughts always need answers. Sometimes they just need acknowledgement. Sometimes understanding that this process exists is enough to reduce the fear around it. Because when you stop seeing your night thoughts as an enemy, they lose some of their power. At the end of the day, or more accurately, at the end of the night, overthinking doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're human, thoughtful, reflective, aware. It means your mind doesn't skim the surface of experience. It means it wants depth, clarity, and connection. And when the world finally goes quiet, it takes